Joining us now from Arkansas Nuclear One, John Dinelli. He's the Site Vice President at Arkansas Nuclear One. Mr. Dinelli, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to speak with us today. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I do appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of A&O and our partnership with the community.
Mr. Dinelli, one of the things that I wanted to cover off the very top here is we talk about outages in this community a lot. We know that they have a tremendous economic impact. We know that they are something that provides a lot of economic opportunities for the folks around the area. But to be completely honest with you, sir, when we say outage, I don't actually know what happens. So can you walk us through the process?
Sure. So basically, just like refueling your vehicle, your car, nuclear plants require periodic refueling. So although instead of probably a frequency of 1 to 2 times per week of you refueling your car, a nuclear plant has to refuel approximately every 18 to 24 months. At the end of an operating cycle, operators perform a controlled shutdown of the unit, taking the plant offline, and that signifies the start of our refueling outage. The primary goal is to refuel a reactor. We cool down, depressurize the plant, we disassemble the reactor itself, and then we remove and replace a portion of the depleted fuel within the reactor with new fuel assemblies. That allows the plant to run for an additional 18 months following the end of the refueling outage. Additionally, while the unit is offline, our team takes the opportunity to complete various maintenance and testing activities along with other major projects to improve the reliability of the station for the next operating cycle. Every detail of a refueling outage is meticulously planned, and everyone on site plays a role. We have major projects that are planned years in advance, with all the work reviewed and approved long before the outage starts. Once the outage commences, we go into a 24/7 operation. We have staff here working around the clock from the time we take the plant offline until such time we bring the plant back up to 100% power and complete the refueling outage.
When an outage happens, there's got to be a lot of people who come in, obviously, to help make this happen. How many people would you estimate are working at the plant at any given moment during one of these events?
So we have a staff here at A&O of roughly almost 1,100 personnel. During a refueling outage, we fully utilize all 1,100 personnel from A&O. We also bring in additional energy personnel from throughout our fleet. But in addition to that, in particular for this outage that's coming up at the end of this week, we are bringing in 1,300 additional contract or supplemental workers to help us to support the outage and help us execute our schedule.
So when we are talking about bringing in that many people, I mean, are these usually people that we're bringing in from other places? Are we contracting local folks? What's the process look like there?
It's a combination of both. We do primarily employ our local trades, so electrical unions, laborers, carpenters. We first pull based on the amount of resources that we need to support the outage. We pull from the local building trades. And then if we need additional personnel, then we'll expand the personnel from, outside of Arkansas. And people come as far as the East Coast or, deep South or Midwest.
We're a real estate company here, and so I'm always talking about where people live and how people can live in places. And so when we're talking about bringing in this many people, obviously hotels are going to fill up, rent houses are going to fill up. What is the economic impact of something like this in an area the size of Russellville from a rough estimation?
I mean, it's hard to give an exact number to the economic, betterment for the community. But, remember, well, as you stated, all 1,300 plus personnel that come in to support the refueling outage at A&O, which is and they're probably here for about 6 weeks. They all have to live in hotels or rental units or camping grounds. They go to our local restaurants and they interact in our local community. So it is, I can't put a dollar number on it, but I could tell you that, based on feedback from the community, it is a pretty big economic influx into our community.
As we've been talking about people coming into the community, I want to focus now on the folks who are moving into Russellville. There's been an influx of people over the last 5 years who have moved into this area, and when they are looking at this community, they're looking at schools, they're looking at crime rates, which are very low, but they're also looking at the fact that there's a great big nuclear power plant over there, and there may be, for the folks who don't necessarily have an education on nuclear energy, I certainly do not. There may be a stigma attached to that. Can you put some folks' mind at ease? How safe is nuclear?
First and foremost, I live and work here. So in fact, my family and I have lived in close proximity to every nuclear plant that I've worked in the past 30 plus years. I wouldn't do that if I didn't believe in nuclear power and feel that it was safe. In fact, with the constant monitoring, radiation detection, robust security, and the dedicated staff of professionals working around the clock 24/7 here, I think being at a nuclear site in America is probably one of the safest places to be. I came from the Northeast where their affection or affinity for nuclear power probably wasn't as high. And I used to get that question all the time. But being a member of the community and showing people that not only will I work at the plant, but have my family live in the community close to the plant, I think really went a long way in showing that these plants are safe and that there's no concern for the local communities and that surround any nuclear plant in the country.
If I may follow up with that, just a general nuclear question, because again, I'm fascinated by it. What are the positives of generating nuclear power?
Well, I'll start across the nationwide. So nationwide, nuclear plants in this country produce about 20% of the national electric grid. A&O specifically, we produce about 82% of the state's carbon-free electricity, which complementary with wind and solar are how we're going to achieve our carbon-free goals in the future. Roughly to put in perspective, A&O generates enough electricity to power over 1 million homes in the state of Arkansas. And just looking at the future, you look at every corporation, every state, and the country as a whole, as we set goals to reduce carbon emissions and generate green energy, I really feel that nuclear is going to be a nuclear production is going to be one of that components that's going to be needed as that balanced mix in order to meet those goals in the future.
We were talking a little bit, and you said something there that I wanted to touch on. You said reducing the carbon footprint. There's a lot of conversation about that happening nationally right now, about this quote unquote going green sort of thing. And then, of course, also making sure that we're reducing carbon emissions. With that thought in mind, Mr. Dinelli, what is the future of nuclear power? And is it a safe alternative for, possibly replacing carbon emissions or carbon fueled energy?
Well, I think that's twofold. There's two parts to that question. So I think nuclear power is going to be vital to meeting those green or carbon-free goals for every state and for the country. You look at nuclear power plants, they were originally licensed for 40 years of operations. And every nuclear plant has the opportunity to relicense in 20-year increments. A&O has already successfully obtained their first 20-year license extension, and we've begun the initial phasing on our second renewal. Over half of the nation's nuclear power plants will need to obtain a second license renewal by the year 2040, and that's to continue operating. So part of that renewal is to make sure that the plants, between internal and external stakeholders, we review the plant and make sure that it can safely operate for that additional 20 years. So with the U.S. nuclear fleet supplying around 20% of the nation's energy supply for the last 30 years, all of it carbon-free, I think it's going to be crucial to continue to run the existing nuclear plants that we have and apply for those additional license extensions for an additional 20 years of operation in conjunction with building new nuclear. There is new, we call them advanced technology nuclear plants. They're smaller design. Safety features are a little more inherent, and so they do provide a lot of value. And I think our portfolio as a nation is going to have to rely on running our existing nuclear as well as building new nuclear for the future.
We're talking to John Dinelli. He's the site vice president of Arkansas Nuclear One. I want to go back to outages for a few minutes here, Mr. Dinelli, because I'm pretty well fascinated by every aspect of Arkansas Nuclear One, but I'm not smart enough to understand it from top to bottom. So I'm hoping you can explain it to me in terms I can understand. The folks who are coming in on a rank and file basis, working in outage, what does their day typically look like?
It's not much different than any other industrial facility. I will tell you that the first thing every employee does, whether you're a permanent A&O employee or a supplemental contractor coming in, is you have to process through our security screening. And that is very similar to what you would go through at any major airport in the country going through TSA. You go through bomb detectors, X-ray machines, metal detectors, and that's to make sure that we keep any threat outside of the plant. Once you process into the facility, we have what we call our plan of the day, which is a basic station-wide alignment meeting. It's where we cover plant status, any changes in the conditions of the plant that people need to be aware of. But the real primary focus is on safety and human performance. So we do a lot, safety is our number one priority here at the station. And that's both the nuclear safety component of running the plant safely, but also safety of the personnel, or what we call industrial safety. So we have this alignment briefing in the morning. It's done with your larger group. So we have the electricians, the mechanics, different vendors or contractors who come in, and that's all done at the same time throughout the station. After that, you would break up into your smaller subcomponents. You would go into what we call our pre-job brief. That's where you get assigned your task for the day. We cover roles and responsibilities of every worker. We cover more safety aspects of the specific job that you are being assigned that day. And then you'll go out once aligned and you fully understand what's expected of you and the task at hand. You'll go out into the plant and you'll perform that maintenance activity or testing sequence. And that's pretty much throughout the day. There's a lot of oversight. We have peer checking is what we call it. So we send two individuals out. One person does a task. The other person will make sure that that task is being done right. And then there's independent oversight of those tasks to ensure that they're done safely and with quality. Towards the end of the day, after your tasks are wrapping up, what you do is prepare for the oncoming shift or the night shift or day shift. Make sure that they're set up for success to execute their task, and you start preparing for the next day's evolutions. And hopefully everybody goes home a little bit more tired after working a hard day and safe. That's pretty much a typical day during an outage.
I wanted to circle back something that I wrote back here too, and I'm sorry I'm a little all over the place. I just want to make sure that I get everything in here. When you were talking a little bit earlier about 20-year extensions or in 20-year increments for commissioning the power plants, every, 3 to 5 years or so, there's a rumor that gets started in the middle of Russellville that says the nuclear plant is going away in 5 years, or A&O is going away in this time. And I've heard it 3 or 4 times in the last 15 years. Can you put folks' minds at ease? A&O's sticking around.
Well, yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, A&O has successfully obtained their first 20-year license renewal. So we operated for our first 40 years, and now we're into the 20-year extension. And we have begun the initial scoping process to apply for our next 20-year license. Now there are many stations in the country that have already successfully obtained their second 20-year license extension. And, we'll have to do our due diligence and go through the process, but I see no reason why A&O could not obtain an additional 20-year license extension and run for that length of time.
Very briefly, because I know that there's a lot of bureaucracy that likely has to go into that, but just from a very generalized perspective, what does it take to obtain that 20-year extension?
Well, the first thing is you have to, as I said, we'll do our own due diligence, make sure that the plant is in a condition where we want to operate it for the next 20 years. You apply to the federal government, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, for that license extension. And then once you submit your application, there is a robust process where the Nuclear Regulatory Commission comes in and basically does a complete review of your systems and operating back history and the future. And basically, they want to prove to themselves that A&O has the personnel and that the plant can run safely for an additional 20 years.
You said a little bit earlier that you have only been in Russellville for a couple of years. Let's talk about this from almost a real estate perspective now. What have you enjoyed about Russellville thus far?
I really do like I grew up, if you have not noticed from my accent, I'm from New York City, originally born.
I wasn't going to guess that, but I was going to, I didn't want to assume.
But so most of my life I did live in New York. Growing up in the inner city, very congested, a lot of activity going on. And, coming into Russellville, into a very small, close-knit community has really been outstanding for me. I do love the environment. The people not only here at work, but the people that I interact with in the community have been very welcoming, open, and willing to show me all the things that Russellville and the surrounding area has to offer. I found, on my personal side of life, I do enjoy hunting, fishing, and there is so much opportunity here for people who live in the community to do those outdoor activities. And it's been really just a great place for me to settle down for now as I continue through A&O.
Was there an initial culture shock for you coming from where you grew up to Russellville, Arkansas, where the biggest thing that happens around here is a sale on Stobie's cheese dip?
So not really that much of a culture shock. Prior to my time at A&O, I did work at one of our plants in New Orleans. So I made the transition from New York down to New Orleans, which was still a big city and smaller. So I've been going in a phased approach. I went from the big New York City to New Orleans and now to Russellville. But as I said, I've always, I grew up hunting and fishing. So, north in the, the mountains of New York. And so this has really been great for me to be able to get back and do some of those things that I grew up doing.
And Mr. Dinelli, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I am interested in the background of the folks who run A&O, specifically you. Your career has had to take a myriad of twists and turns, I would assume. How did you get started in this business, and was this kind of the plan all along, or do you find yourself here and not knowing really how it happened?
No, I think, it started very early on. So I've been in nuclear power for over 31 years now. And I was an engineer in college. Mechanical engineering degree is what I was pursuing. And halfway through my college career, I was given the opportunity to become a college intern at the Indian Point Nuclear Power Station in New York. And that's pretty much it. So I loved what I went there, worked as a college intern, and I loved it. It was, just the professionals that you deal with, the technology, I truly believe in it. I do believe it's safe, and we already discussed that. And I really think that A&O specifically, but I really think that nuclear power, was a really vital, important part of this nation's power portfolio. So I enjoyed what I did, and I just stuck with it ever since. I worked at our nuclear plant in New York for 26 years. I did many various roles in maintenance, but mostly in the operating area. I held a senior reactor operator license from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for 15 years. So I was a control room operator for many of those years, got a lot of experience on the inner workings and how to operate a nuclear plant. And then I moved up into the leadership or management area. I left Indian Point as the plant manager. I went to Waterford. I spent some time, 2 years at Waterford Station in New Orleans as the site vice president. And then I transitioned here to Russellville as the site vice president at Arkansas.
Wrapping up here, Mr. Dinelli, what are the things that you want the folks of Russellville to know about A&O?
I think the biggest thing I want you to know is, one, we take a lot of pride and go through a lot of effort to ensure that we run this facility safely and economically. And we do value our partnership with the local community. There is no shortage of people who are requesting support for local community events or charities, and the staff here is always willing to help and eager to help. And we do value, as I said, our relationship with the community. It is vital to us. So, we have a saying in energy that we power life, and we truly feel that we power life not only for Russellville, but for Arkansas in general.
All right. John Dinelli, he's the site vice president of Arkansas Nuclear One. Mr. Dinelli, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with us. I hope we can do this again soon sometime, sir.
It was my pleasure and a great opportunity, and I look forward to discussing additional topics with you in the future.
All right. Outstanding. Thanks so much.